Westeros, Episode 4, a WorldCon of Ice and Fire. Hello there, and thanks for tuning in to Radio Westeros today. I'm Lady Guinevere in Boston.
And I'm Yolkboy. I'm in England.
Yes, and it's good that you are in England because you were very close to LonCon, the World Science Fiction and Fantasy Convention, held recently in London on the 14th through the 18th of August.
That's right, and I couldn't miss this opportunity, so I went to LonCon, and that's what today's episode is all about.
Well, I thought we should send Yolkboy away to LonCon, where George R.R. Martin was giving a reading of Sons of the Dragon, an excerpt from his Fire and Blood fake history book that he's working on. I told him to grab his dictaphone, get on the train at short notice, and bring back some goods for us all. And Yolkboy has delivered.
Well, I hope so. I wouldn't want to disappoint. I managed to get interviews with Elio Garcia, aka Ran, and Linda Antonsen, co-authors of George's World of Ice and Fire book that comes out on October the 28th. And they're also the owners of Westeros.org forums and wiki. Then I got an interview with Sir Mountain Goat, who some of you might know for his animated timeline project at sirmountaingoat.co.uk. He's also one of the founders of TitanCon, the Belfast convention.
And finally you interviewed Xray, didn't you?
Yes, I did. She's in charge, or the Baroness as others call it, of A Song of Ice and Fire fan group, the Brotherhood Without Banners. She's a long-term George fan who's seen it all and has many great stories which you can hear today.
So, we're going to begin with a detailed chat about George's reading. Lots of new information on Aegon the Conqueror and his sons, so stay tuned for info you won't find anywhere else. There's also an accompanying essay and a photo journal up at radiowesteros.com if you want to look while you listen.
And I'll also be talking about getting a book signed by George, my time with the Brotherhood Without Banners, and the moment I asked George R.R. Martin a question. All of this and more. This is Radio Westeros, a WorldCon of Ice and Fire. Yolkboy sound log, and it's the first day of LonCon. I am on the ground floor where people are queuing up to get their memberships as we speak. The queue is absolutely enormous. It goes up 2 floors and kind of doubles back on itself like a bit of a snake.
So George's reading at WorldCon this year was taken from Sons of the Dragon, a story from Targaryen history that we hope to see in full one day in the Grrm.
Right, so George's fake history is also the source material for the upcoming World of Ice and Fire book. Like much of the older Targaryen history that we've seen, this tale is related to Archmaester Gildain, whom George reminded us was a strongly opinionated and pedantic old fart.
So in terms of style and perspective, as it is with real history, I guess we'd best keep that in mind. So now we're going to run through a summary of the reading, which began with a description of Aegon's sisters.
Yeah, the description went something like this. Aegon the Conqueror's 2 sister wives had the kind of classic looks and the beauty of true Targaryens. Each of them gave Aegon a son, but otherwise they were very different people. Rhaenys birthed Aenys in 7 AC, and he was a really weak and sickly child from the descriptions. Rumours circulated that because Aenys was so unalike to Aegon, that he might actually be a bastard child from another father. When he was given Quicksilver, a baby dragon born on Dragonstone, he grew a bit stronger. But when he was 3, Rhaenys and her dragon were killed in Dawn. So Aenys began to regress, and again he became weak.
Now Visenya became pregnant in 11 AC and birthed Maegor, a strong child who immediately seemed an opposite of Aenys. Maegor stayed with his mother on Dragonstone, and the title Prince of Dragonstone was given him. He was rumoured to have slain a cat there at the age of 3.
Right, that sounds like someone, doesn't it?
Yes.
Killing cats.
Another attractive child.
And Aenys became a reasonable fighter. He wasn't great, I don't think he was terrible either. And he occasionally wielded King Aegon's sword, Blackfire, Valyrian steel sword, obviously. However, Aenys' real gifts were elsewhere. He was an attractive, clever, likeable young man by the sounds of it. He was an excellent rider and loved to mount his dragon Quicksilver. And Maegor wasn't a very good rider. He didn't really like animals too much, and he was kicked by a horse, I think it was at the age of 8. Maegor sought revenge for this by cutting the stable boy's face, and he also killed the horse. So he is showing some unpleasant signs in his personality, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of behaviour left him with very few friends. But despite being unpopular, Maegor was a promising warrior from a young age, excelling at jousting, melee, and so on, everything really. And Visenya gave him Dark Sister in 25 AC when he was 13.
So far, we've seen how unlike the two brothers are. But we'd like to note that this theme of opposing siblings is not new to A Song of Ice and Fire, Daemon Blackfire and Daeron II being a close parallel. And the rumors of Aenys being a bastard might be countered by the fact that gossips were comparing him to Aegon and not to Rhaenys. Perhaps Rhaenys was fond of animals and charismatic, as Aenys seems to have been.
Yeah, we just don't know enough about Rhaenys to know what her true personality was like, to see if there's a comparison there. So the Targaryens interbred, as was tradition among many families in Valyria, particularly those who bred and rode dragons. The blood of the dragon must remain pure. And that was a quote there. We believe this is further evidence towards Valyrian blood having certain magical properties, we'll call it, and weakens the counter that the Targaryens are simply arrogant because there was other families trying to keep their line pure too.
Right, exactly. But the faith despised incest, and so friction with the Targaryen rule was inevitable. Aegon was a great diplomat and worked with the faith to maintain a functional relationship. With no sisters, in 22 AC, Aenys married Alyssa Velaryon. Both were 15. These were happy times, and the realm soon welcomed Princess Rhaena into the world. This pushed Maegor down the succession order, and the faith suggested that he take Cerys Hightower as a wife to avoid incest, as Visenya had suggested that Maegor marry his infant niece.
And in 25 AC, Maegor married Cerys, the niece of the High Septon, with Aegon's diplomatic blessing. Maegor, who was 13, boasted of consummating the marriage a dozen times on their bedding night. His bride was 23, so 10 years older than him. He's quite a cocky lad, I think. Cerys couldn't conceive, however, and Aenys fathered Prince Aegon in that time. In 29 AC, Alyssa birthed Viserys. In 34 AC, Jaehaerys. In 36 AC, Alysanne. So Maegor was really slipping down the line here. And at 16, he became the youngest knight in the kingdoms when he was knighted by his father using Blackfire, and was proving to be quite a warrior. He rooted out a pirate king, Sargasso San, I've got written down, but wasn't a dragon rider at this point, and some said he was afraid, but he claimed there was only one dragon that was worthy of him.
King Aegon was aging, and in 35 AC he ordered his hand, Alan Stokeworth, to build a new castle with Visenya. Aegon died in 37 AC and was cremated with Blackfire, which did not melt on the pyre due to its being Valyrian steel, and I quote, "No common fire can harm Valyrian steel."
Yeah, and George just said that it slightly darkened the metal, but it was impervious to heat. We wonder if perhaps Aenys had a kind of diplomatic personality, which would actually be a similarity with Aegon if you think about it. And anyway, the new king was challenged immediately as bandits arose from the woodwork. Harren the Red, a Vulture King, Logos of the Iron Islands, and Jonas Arryn all caused trouble. Aenys just simply didn't deal with these rebels effectively in any way, shape or form. And we'll actually discuss these 4 false kings in a lot more detail later on in the podcast, so we don't get sidetracked here.
Now, Maegor dealt with Jonas Arryn when he finally mounted Balerion, and Aenys named him Hand of the King in return. It seems to us that Maegor takes on Aegon's warrior side, and Aenys has Aegon's diplomatic traits. Put these two together, and there's a good king there. But it's clear that the half-brothers have weaknesses that Aegon did not.
Aenys veered away from battle at any opportunity, and was somewhat bohemian by the descriptions of him, again contrasting with Maegor. With Alyssa birthing 6 children, Maegor was getting pretty fed up with his wife at this point. Remember, he boasted about making her pregnant a dozen times on his wedding night, and he abandoned his wife and wedded Alyce Harroway. This was polygamous and shocked the kingdoms, the faith, and everyone else, and kind of upset the balance a bit. Polygamy being akin to, or perhaps worse than, in some eyes, than incest. Aenys ordered Maegor to give up his new wife, fearing the faith's reaction, but Maegor chose 5 years of exile in Pentos instead.
So Aenys became inspired and worked hard to finish the Red Keep. In this time he contemplated the Targaryen traditions, and thinking of the 1,000-year legacy he planned for the keep, made the disastrous decision to wed his son to his daughter, Aegon and Rhaena, aged 18 and 15. This was the explanation given, but it might not be the full story, as it seems suspiciously out of character for Aenys.
Yes, it does. We've wondered if there's something else going on, but like we said, the explanation given was that he kind of grew proud in his days building the Red Keep. And with Maegor gone, the faith sensed weakness and really rose up against Aenys, who just didn't understand how his popularity had diminished. Aenys was a thinker and maybe a kind of philosopher, and really wasn't ready for this degree of confrontation. The likeable man was now a hated king, and the faith dubbed him King Abomination for his part in the incestuous marriage. At this point, Aenys was very naive as a leader, and his power was really slipping. The faith grew stronger and stronger, and many of the faith's followers saw this as a kind of holy war, denouncing Targaryen rule.
And Aenys became frail and retreated to Dragonstone, where Visenya was present. He had problems with his bowels and became very sick. When the Maesters could no longer care for him, Visenya took over. 3 days later, Aenys was dead. We feel the implication could be that Aenys was poisoned with tears of Lys by Visenya. Regardless, remember he had struggled with the pressure and that he was always weak as a child.
Yes, so we're not the first to point out that about the tears of Lys, and that's because of the problems with his bowels. And Visenya flew straight to Pentos on Vhagar, and I think George said this was within hours of Aenys' death, and she returned with Maegor riding on the back of Balerion, the Black Dread. And Visenya's actions here make us think the possibility that she did murder Aenys, perhaps with the tears of Lys or poison or whatever, now looks even more intriguing.
Okay, that was the end of the first part of our analysis of Yolkboy's notes regarding the Sons of the Dragon reading, and the second half is coming after a chat with Elio and Linda.
Yeah, we thought we'd split up the analysis of that reading in case the information was a bit too much just for one sitting. So after George's reading, I met up with Elio and Linda to interview them about the upcoming World of Ice and Fire book.
Right, and you met them in the food court?
Yes, the ideal place for an interview, the food court.
And they took you through their relationship with George, the evolution of Westeros.org, forums and wiki.
Yeah, they did, and also the World of Ice and Fire app. And perhaps most relevant, they also talked me through the making of the World of Ice and Fire coffee table style book about the history of Westeros.
So, this is what happened when Radio Westeros met Elio and Linda.
Okay, so my first question before we start talking about the World of Ice and Fire book that's going to come out soon is about Westeros.org, the forum I seem to spend half my life at. could you give us some idea about the evolution and how that started?
Well, it really started with us doing heraldry and just putting up the heraldry from the books and doing little graphical representations and putting together a list on a very basic free website. And this was meant as a resource for the future players on our role-playing game in Westeros, the one we had asked George for permission on when we first got in touch with him. So it was all intended as a resource for our players, and we're going to put up heraldry, we're going to do the concordance and things like that. And it kind of just grew, and then we got in touch with the existing forums.
Yeah, we were involved in the earliest forum, Dragonstone, with Peter Gibbs, and that one died fairly soon after its inception, right? And we're talking like 96, 97. And that moved over to EE Site, and that was Revanchi who took over. Peter Gibbs disappeared, and Revanchi started up a new forum. We stayed at EE Site for a while, so it's constantly started to lose data, and then we moved to Easy Board. And at that point, I had been promoted to. I basically Revanchi had me as a moderator. And after a while, she said, I'm going to medical school. I don't have the time, so. She sort of had her own website, and she gave that website to some fans, and she gave the forum to me to run. So I ran the Easy Board site, and that was like the first. Those are the first iterations. And then Easy Board started to become way too expensive, and we decided, well, now we have Westeros.org. Let's actually go and spring for forum software and set up a server for the help of our friends Rachel Blackman, Sparks on the forum, and we had the first Westeros.org forum at that time. That was 2005, I think. 2004, 2005?
Yeah, and we had the domain, I think we registered in 98 or something like that. So it had the basics of the site since then, and then eventually it grew with the addition of the forum and then eventually the wiki as well.
Yeah, joining it. Yeah. Input from the community.
Yeah,
exactly.
The wiki software was a big one. Media wiki, people said, we should have a wiki. I said, okay, we can, we think we have the room, we can set up a wiki, and people, we were going to be hands-off. We're providing the hosting and sort of just a little bit of guidelines, and people, it's the community who has created the wiki.
Right, so that's it. It shows how far you can come with an interest that might have become an obsession from the heraldry days into a fully fledged forum and wiki that we all love. And my next question is, how did you end up forging a relationship with George that became professional when you, for example, edited Dance with Dragons and assisted with the continuity and also worked on the World of Ice and Fire app?
It all really started with contacting George about the game and then showing him the website early on, and he adored the heraldry. So much so that he sent us a long list of houses and their heraldry.
Was that your initial connection?
That was our initial connection.
Kind of
we asked the art of the heraldry. He loved that. He looked into the whole permission for the game, of course, because he's an old-time role player himself, and so he kind of understood the interest, and he eventually said yes to that. But the heraldry he sent us all these notes. And he even sent us, actually, for our game, he sent us, and he told us not to tell anyone back then, but I think it's safe to say now, he sent us his first histories of, like an outline of the history of
Aegon the Unworthy.
Aegon the Unworthy.
And Vale the Blessed.
Vale the Blessed.
So he already had notes for that particular time period.
He was
like his mistresses.
Okay.
We knew the names of those since probably 99?
Serenade and
all that, 99, 2000.
It was already fleshed out.
Yeah.
Bloodraven was introduced in there before he was ever mentioned in the Hedge Knight stories.
Which kind of
Better
proves
Steel.
how he builds his world isn't necessarily a kind of linear process.
No, absolutely. I mean, I recall asking him about, when I interviewed him, I guess after the first season, about Bloodraven and sort of his role in A Song of Ice and Fire, the series. Did you always know that character existed? And he said, well, I always knew someone like him existed.
Right, so he
over time,
shades it in.
Yeah.
But he knows this person's going to do this.
Yeah.
And he's going to be a bit like this.
And then it sort of, the story tells him what exactly we're going to be and so on.
Fills in the shades.
So that's really how...
it started with that sort of contact, basically, that we had a lot of... and then... Because he knew that we were working on these resources for the game and working on the concordance, and we showed him that. Elio showed him the work that he had done, and he thought that was a very interesting resource. He actually sent our Word document, I think, to his editors and such, and they thought, okay, that was a nice way of fact-checking things. So
it began to function for him.
Yeah,
it
exactly.
began
And I
to
think
have appeal.
I don't remember when we got the first bit of text that we proofread.
Well, the very first has to be the Feast for Crows manuscript we got.
Yes, probably that, yeah. So basically sending it a little
2004.
early and just asking, if you catch any continuity things and things like that.
Right, okay.
And then
so you're being involved in the kind of editing process and
in the proofing. Editing is a different thing. Proofing.
Continuity editing.
Yeah, so an extra
yeah.
pair of eyes,
Yeah.
specifically.
But what I mean is
yeah.
you're brought in kind of after the product and
Yeah.
kind of post-production, if you want to call it.
Yeah, we got. Well, I mean, with Dance of Dragons, I have to say that one's quite different. I mean, with A Feast for Crows, George sent us the partial manuscripts, which was, and this is the pre-split. This is before he split A Feast for Crows and Dance of Dragons.
Right.
He sent it to us, and also to Girl, who was the old three-fisted baron of the Brotherhood of Banners. He was sort of the first leader of the BWB.
Okay.
And so I forget if it was a wager or something, and he sent it to Lodi, and Lodi said, hey, is it all right if I get if Elio gets a copy as well? Yeah, George said fine, and so we decided to send some notes home. But I mean, it's really interesting seeing. I mean, there are chapters in that manuscript that weren't published until Dance of Dragons, so we got that in 2004.
Right.
And we've been sitting on that information for
a long time.
A long time. And there's
so
lots of-
you've been browsing the forums, watching people argue, and you've kind of known.
Yeah, and so,
you're right, or mostly you're wrong.
And I mean, my position is if I had a theory on something and George just proves it, I can't suddenly one day turn around and start saying, oh no, I've just changed my mind. This entire there are certain things that I argue that I know are wrong because I was wrong about them, and I can't reveal.
You
to
put
people.
yourself in the kind of mindset that you kind of unseen what you've seen.
So there's some
This
things.
is one of the reasons that I don't post regularly, is that I find it very difficult to split the information like that, and I'm terrified of making a mistake. So
right.
I feel like I'd have to check every time I was going to post something. Like, okay, I really have to double check that I'm not saying anything here that I'm not supposed to be saying.
Yeah,
so.
of course, because of your profiles, people are going to read everything you post 10 times more than what everyone else posts. Well, okay, my next question is, I might have got this wrong, but from there you've gone on to co-author the World of Ice and Fire book. Maybe I've made a mistake in the timeline, I think. Yeah. But for our listeners who don't know about this book, can you clarify the timeline and then summarise what this book actually is?
Yeah, so the book was something that George had publishers, not just Random House, other publishers kind of coming to him saying, we could put together a sort of a coffee table book about your world and the setting and its history, and you're interested. And he was interested, but he was in the middle of writing the series, and he thought, I'll need someone to help me. And so I happened at just the right time to be visiting my family in the United States, and we were doing a cross-country trip, and we passed through New Mexico. And I realized, hey, we're getting close to Santa Fe. So I actually called you long distance. I mean, this is...
Called me up and then asked me, hey, can you try and get in touch with Paris or George and see if there's any chance that I can meet them when I'm passing through, basically. Because I emailed Paris and managed to...
This sounds very much like the kind of relationship me and Lady Gwyn from Radio Westeros have got, coordinating things, like trying to do this.
Yeah, so that was very, very surprising, and out of the blue,
it worked out.
Elio just got the idea when he was passing through. Kind of close to where George is living, see if we can arrange something.
It was the same day. It was all very... And George dropped all his plans and said, yeah, sure.
No, really?
Yeah, he did. So gave us the directions. We got his phone number, and I called him again and sort of arranged a meeting, and where he lived, and he'd drive us to some restaurant. Say, your name Garcia, you probably like spicy foods. At the time I said, no, actually I'm Cuban, and the Cuban cuisine isn't very spicy at all, and I'm not really used to it. So okay, so we went to a place called the Bull Ring, which was for steak and such, and while we were there we chatted about all sorts of things. I mean, not so much the books, comic books. We were both fans of comics and so on. But
so you related to him beyond just a Song of Ice and Fire.
And just sort of science fiction in general.
Just general.
He's met all these sort of great authors who I've read and we both admire. But in the course of it, we did kind of talk a little bit about the history or the setting, and he brought up that publishers were coming to him, and he said, would you and Linda want to help me write it? I couldn't think of anyone else better, and I didn't even think I should check with Linda. I said, I'm pretty sure it's a yes that we'll do it. He said, there were no contracts then, nothing had been signed. It was all in negotiation, feeling out. But he said, it might happen. And a year later, he said, I've worked out a deal with Random House.
Wow, it
and
actually happened.
Yeah, and we signed a contract, and this contract gets signed in 2006. So that's for the World of Ice and Fire. That's the book. 50,000 words was the word count. It's gotten a little bit bigger since then.
Yeah, he said over 300,000.
300,000 was what he wrote himself in his contribution, but we couldn't use all that.
No.
The final word count was, am I thinking, is 180 wrong?
I think
150?
something like that. And I mean, keep in mind also that what we started with, we had this idea of doing, as George was presenting during the reading here, he was talking about how it's the conceit of a maester who's writing in Westeros about these events.
Yes.
Well, the thing was that we sort of had the feeling, I guess the publisher and everyone felt that, well, a volume like this needs to have a character reference as well. And I was a little dubious about that myself. I really liked the in-world conceit. I think I was the first one actually who suggested it when we talked about it at the dinner where we sang or the breakfast where we sang the contracts. That was something that I was very keen on, having that conceit. So the idea of having the characters in there always felt a little bit wrong, but it felt like something that had to be done.
Okay.
And that was the easiest bit for us to start with when we started writing. Once we'd sort of structured what we wanted to do, we started at the section of the characters because we knew that George didn't have to fill in anything there pretty much.
Right.
And just that part, once we had covered all the major characters, we did like secondary down to tertiary characters, I think. What was the WorldCon to that? That was over
70,000,
yes,
80,000
that was already over the 50,000 just on the characters.
So
that was like
grew, and you start to reconceptualize what the product is. I
well,
guess.
then we thought, maybe we just cut it back to like primary and secondary characters, and then it started feeling
What's the point?
more and more out of place. Unfortunately, with the delay, that meant that we got into the territory where apps were suddenly a thing. It was like, let's take all the stuff. It was basically their idea of what was written for the characters.
Okay.
For the book, and we'll stuff all of that into the app, and then we'll actually fill out the characters that you had cut out and weren't planning to do. Just put them back in and put in places and all these things again.
So you found a place for everything on the cutting room floor was picked up, and you could mold it into the app with other things as well.
Yeah,
obviously.
and technically, I mean, it is all part of the same contract. We haven't signed a new contract related to it, so it is considered sort of the ebook/app companion for the World of Ice and Fire. So basically, all of our words are out there, and then some, but in the app, and then in the book. The way it turned out is it's gotten more of a 50-50 mix between George and us. Originally it was going to be much more us, and George was just going to write some sidebars, as you saw.
Sidebars.
And then the sidebars turned into massive volumes all on their own.
That's a George sidebar, isn't
That's
it?
a George sidebar.
300,000 words.
Especially a problem was that some of the kings, the earlier kings, we had fairly sparse detail on. Like, we could piece together quite a bit for some of the reigns, but some were very sketchy from what had been mentioned in the books so far.
just the books.
So we'd have a paragraph from the books, and then it looked like, this is going to be the text, the paragraph, and then we have a sidebar that is going to be like 20 pages. I think we may need to do some reworking here.
Right.
And that's where
a lot of organisation, a lot of
rewriting and kind of
rewriting and
how
sculpturing this into something, forming the kind of concept, because it's very conceptual, isn't it?
Yeah.
And talking about the concept, we talk about the art. There is a kind of dummy copy on display. I haven't got around to seeing it, but could you say something about the art? Was it always going to be important that you had great artwork for this book?
George has been stressing that all along.
It
has to be gorgeous. It has to be huge. It has to have lots of art. He loves fantasy art.
Yeah.
He really wants to represent a lot of different artists, and so that was that has been one of the. That's also held it up a little bit, just getting the right sort of mix of artists and getting the pieces finished and getting them put in the right place.
There is a lot of art in this book, isn't there?
Yes.
From what I gather, it's serious. This is what makes it a kind of coffee table experience, isn't it?
It's. I think it's safe to say there's at least 100 pieces. I'd probably say more like 150 pieces of art.
150 pieces.
I think
of art
because
that's with obviously some are smaller spot illustrations and things like that.
But they all add to the
it all adds to it, and even those were, we tried to go over. I mean, we looked over all the art. George, because of the time constraints, weren't able to be involved in every piece, but we tried to make sure that everything got as accurate as possible. And I know that some of them in particular he took great interest in, like, the mistresses of Aegon IV. He was very particular about getting them right.
Okay, so we get to see Serenay and Co.
Yes.
Which we, to my mind, I don't think we ever had a decent description of Serenay. So
George has very clear ideas of how.
But I mean, he hasn't kind of leaked those. We've seen Shara, but we have, in SSM form.
But he basically presented descriptions of each of the women to the artist, Mr. Magali Villeneuve, right?
Yeah, Magali Villeneuve. Yeah.
She's the artist who did those, and. So yeah, he had some very particular ideas about those characters and a number of other characters and certain things. And other things he was more hands-off. Like he was just happy with the general concept. So it was always. He's always talked about DK Publishing as a publisher who specializes in coffee table books for like genre stuff, and he particularly cited for Conan. They apparently have a big, beautiful coffee table book of Conan art, and that was his gold standard. He didn't. And he said, he's seen other world books for fantasy writers like Robert Jordan's, and there he felt that was an example of what not to do in terms of illustration.
So it sounds like he had a really clear vision of the art. He was always tied it to the product. Okay, so that's about the art. Okay, so I'm going to ask each of you which parts of this book you enjoyed working on, maybe because you enjoyed the process or the intrigue. Linda first.
Well, it was obviously very exciting in that period when George was sending the Targaryen material, and we were getting up in the morning and like, here's 30,000 words more to read through,
and else has.
And then the process of pulling out the detail that we were going to use. But I'm also very much I'd say that a lot of the organization work was what I focused on, and that was something that I always wanted from the start, to make sure that this was well organized and well structured, because I know that when I'm working with Elio, it has to be well organized and well structured, because that's not his strong side. So
that's not right. Okay.
No, so I really like working on that sort of thing and making sure that
everything's in order.
It fits together, and that there is a logical structure to how So I really enjoyed that part of the work. That sort of the practical hands-on.
So that's more of a general view.
Yeah.
And Elio, what?
My very favorite thing, actually, it has to be. I invented lots of maesters and their titles of works that get quoted. Sort of, there's a lot of sidebars where maester so and so in this book here discusses such and that's how we would drop some of the details. And I'd often be the one inventing the maesters and their titles.
So you're shading in some of the.
Yeah.
There's a maester, he says this, but you're doing the
inventing that stuff, and George will, he
approve it or something.
He'll approve it basically. When he did revising, he would keep them basically. My very favorite one is a maester. I think it's Maester Kerf who wrote a book called Songs the Dead Men Sing, which is about the Iron Men, or the Drowned Men Sing, I think I said actually, Songs Down, which is actually a riff on a title of an anthology, a collection of George's called Songs the Dead Men Sing.
Right.
So he liked that one, he kept that one in.
That's the kind of thing he's done with the Stooges and everything.
So that's my favorite thing, I think. I just enjoyed that.
Yeah, well, naming maesters, that's...
and books, can be, the fake... George enjoyed the fake history a lot, and that was certainly a big part of it for us as well, because we talked a lot about that before we got started, and when we were discussing this conceit, the idea that trying to have these very medieval titles and getting the feel that this really is some sort of semi-scholarly work that this maester is trying to pull together, and also we ended up creating a bit of a backstory for our maester alter ego, who's done the bulk of the condensing of the book. I mean, George's
a backstory behind the POV.
Gildane, as George mentioned during the reading, is his alter ego, I guess one could say, because he's the one who's then written all these secret histories, or all these very detailed Targaryen histories, and then Maester Yandel is the guy who's put together this book of sort of condensed information. So I think you made him a foundling at the Citadel, or a foundling who was raised at the Citadel.
Yep, that was it's Yandel. The Y is an E sound.
Oh, right. I keep forgetting that.
Someone will figure that out eventually.
Yes,
but
see, I even forget myself.
Actually, I told George, and he forgot about it.
George forgot.
Oh, he called him Yandel, and he knows it's not Yandel because I discussed it. And he quite liked it. I told him why that was the name we had.
Okay. Okay, my next question is for all the kind of theorists out there, to what extent is the World of Ice and Fire book an opportunity for George to release a few clues that's pertinent to the 5 books? Or is it more purely like background information? Do you think he's got a few things hidden in there?
I would say 99% of it is background information. But there's that 1%, which is just a little bit of...
There's got to be something, right?
There's a little
few
bit.
Things,
There are some parallels, I think, that he decided to put in. In particular, I was rereading A Dance with Dragons, and I think he may have put in a parallel of phrasing for where a character says something and presents themselves in a particular situation, which is similar to
reminiscent of something
of an event in.
But you've got to be vague now. You let us figure that one out.
Yes.
See if we come to the same conclusion. So, for all the theorists, I think even the 1% is going to be worth it.
Oh
with
yeah,
all that
I
artwork
would think so. I mean, there were things I tweeted. I think people saw me tweet about like, wow, just read something. Could be a really big reveal, or it could be a giant red herring, which is a thing, and I think everyone will know what it is when they come across it. And then there was ever a time where I did tweet, it was really satisfying when something I've long felt, believed, and argued for turned out to be right, where George kind of confirms it. It's nothing. It's not a huge thing. In such,
did you tweet about that?
I did tweet about it. I think
you said that great feeling when something, the theory comes true or something like that.
And it's a portion of a larger theory,
and it's unambiguous.
It's not ambiguous. It's a particular detail, but I've always said this is how it is, and it is. It turns out it's pretty much right.
So when it's out, you'll come and say, this is what I was talking about.
Sure. If anyone asks, I'll be happy to say what it was.
Okay, my final question. Do you see yourselves diving into publishing again after a presumably enlightening and enjoyable process here?
Well...
Is it something you've thought about?
It's kind of started becoming a thing that we've thought more and more about, sort of having that...
With the experience.
Yes, having the opportunity, exactly. And there's been people who've asked about it here at the convention, basically. So, are you thinking of doing anything more on your own and such? And I think that, as I said when we were talking about that earlier, fantasy is one of those fields where just about every reader is also thinking about writing. It's such a community thing. I think the fact that so many writers come from the community, it means that a lot of people think of the possibilities and sort of find themselves interested in telling stories. And I've started writing down ideas at least.
Okay, well, it's kind of the time is right now, isn't it? With your name on the front cover of a George R.R. Martin book?
We shall see. I mean,
there's just this lazy Cuban sitting here.
I've been working on a book already. I can't rush me to go rushing off onto another one right off. So we'll see. And also, I mean, if any other opportunities to do stuff with Westeros comes up, any other sort of related... I mean, we have kind of vaguely talked about maybe it'll be a second edition once the series is all done to kind of expand a bit more. Maybe we'll have a hand, and I don't know, in Fire and Blood to some degree. I don't know. But
it seems it's just growing, isn't it?
It is growing.
It doesn't seem to be a shortage of material coming from George one way or another.
No.
Okay, so finally, why don't we talk about the release details, just so our listeners know.
Right. The World of Ice and Fire will be published by Random House in the US and by HarperCollins Voyager in the UK, and I guess in the rest of Commonwealth.
Yeah, Canada is same as
North America, I think.
Random House, so
October 28th. It will also be published in a number of other countries. Poland has got it being translated. Sweden is going to have it translated. I believe French, Portuguese,
Russian,
Spanish, German,
Spanish.
Was there Italian? I can't recall if there was Italian.
I don't think there was an Italian yet.
Not yet, anyways. Hungarian, though.
Yeah.
So there'll be those countries. There'll be a variety of release dates. We think, for example, the Swedish edition will be in the spring. it all depends on how long it's going to take to translate. But so yeah, it's
there's going to be an audiobook in English.
An audiobook, that's news to me. An audiobook for all
read
those
by
audio
Roy
fans.
Dotrice. Roy Dotrice is reading the audiobook.
Who lots of people enjoyed his official readings of the first books.
Yeah.
So he's back, and you've got him to do it. And he's George is a fan of his.
Oh yes, they've gone way back, obviously, from Beauty and the Beast when they worked together there, and he's not a young man anymore, so we actually kind of helped them set up a version of the manuscript that he could more easily read.
Okay.
So so he's working on that now, I think.
Right now.
Basically.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks so much, Ran and Linda. You've been really nice to me. We spoke yesterday, didn't we? And you've been very welcoming and agreeing to do this interview. So all the best from Radio Westeros.
Oh, thank you, and we'll be happy to be on again.
Thank you so much for having us, really.
We'd love to have you on sometime. Maybe if we can find a subject matter and focus on something else.
After the book is published, we'd be happy to discuss more nuts and bolts of it once.
Maybe if we devote an episode to this and maybe give you a chunk.
Yeah.
And come on and do something with us.
Yeah.
Okay, 28th of October, the World of Ice and Fire book. Really looking forward to it. I hope you listeners are too.
Guests joining us in the food court.
Reports on George's reading.
Yolkboy at WorldCon.
Radio
Westeros. Wow, what a great interview, Yolkboy.
Thank you.
Yeah, did Elio and Linda just offer to make an episode with us when the World of Ice and Fire comes out?
Yeah, I think they did. They want to do something with us, and we'll try to make that happen. So that's something to look forward to, I think.
Yeah, it is. And so how were they?
Yeah, they were really friendly. I met them on the first day, and we immediately launched into deep discussions about theories and so on. Some of the old school fans I met were perhaps slightly bored with talking about A Song of Ice and Fire quite deeply, but with Elio and Linda, it was just pure enthusiasm. We were all talking about theories and so on right off the bat, so we just connected in that sense straight away.
Great, so the World of Ice and Fire episode should be lots of fun.
Well, I hope we can get the four of us together and have a good old chat about this book. And thanks to Elio and Linda for the interview at very short notice, and best of luck with the release and other projects. I must confess, and I'm allowed to say this much, I think, that I've actually seen some of the World of Ice and Fire book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, after the interview, Elio invited me to name one specific area of the book that I'd like to know more about. So I said a certain word, and Elio opened up his Kindle and showed me, and I got to read a short section right there in the food court.
And
it was great. There was one line which really took me by complete surprise. It's something that I think everyone has misinterpreted or got wrong, but unfortunately for now I'm bound to secrecy. But it was really intriguing, to say the least.
Oh, you tease.
Yeah, sorry, but some secrets are too dangerous to share, as Ned thought in Game of Thrones. But it convinced me more than ever that this World of Ice and Fire book is something that everyone should be considering grabbing when it comes out on October the 28th, and I really can't wait for that one.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the various bandits that plagued King Aenys' reign.
Yeah, and we've already talked about Aenys perhaps being too soft politically, which seemed to give these people, these bandits, the impetus to stand up to him. Aegon might have changed the political situation in Westeros, but this revolution was far from being cemented, with lords and villains remembering what it was like when they could do just as they pleased.
So, first of all, there was a situation at Harrenhal. Lord Quentin Cohetus died in 9 AC, and his grandson Gargon took over at Harrenhal. He was lecherous and exercised the Lord's right of the first night, having sex with the young brides. There was a maid whom he'd wronged who wanted revenge, and she let Harren the Red, a supposed grandson of Harren the Black, through the gates. Harren castrated Gargon, feeding his genitals to a dog.
Oh, that doesn't sound too nice, does it?
Not really.
And Harren declared himself Lord of Harrenhal, whilst Aenys hesitated and didn't attack immediately as Lord Tully of Riverrun had suggested. Harren basically killed everyone that was in Harrenhal and then went into hiding in the woods. And a long time later, Bernard Brune slew Harren.
Next there was trouble in the Vale. Lord Ronald Arryn's younger brother Jonos declared himself King of the Vale, locking away Ronald. Aenys sent troops to the Vale, but then cancelled his plans and sent them to find Harren the Red instead. He was hesitant and indecisive again. House Royce marched against the Pretender, and Jonos threw his brother out the moon door. The Eyrie held up to the siege until Maegor descended on Balerion. Jonas' supporters didn't want to burn, so they turned him over, and Maegor threw him from the moon door. Maegor then showed no mercy to those supporters, hanging them all. Uber Arryn was given power then.
Right, Uber Arryn, and I think he was the cousin actually. And it seems that Ronald was the young boy that Visenya took for a ride on Dragonback when she came to make the Vale bend the knee. Anyway, now to the Iron Islands, where there was a priest called Lodos who declared himself king. Gorin Greyjoy attacked Lodos and sent Lodos's preserved head to Aenys, who offered a favour in return. Gorin demanded expulsion of the faith from the Iron Islands, and Aenys was obliged to agree to this, and really this was another terrible decision from Aenys.
Yeah, it really was. And meanwhile, in the Dornish marches, a rebel called the Vulture King started an uprising as revenge for previous injustices at the hands of House Targaryen. Thousands of Dornish men sided with the Vulture King over the Dornish princess Doria, who claimed to want peace, but might have actually been in cahoots with him. The Vulture King had a rabble army and soon attacked the Reach.
Yeah, this rabble army, and I remember George saying that they gave off quite a stench, took Harmon Dondarrion's castle at Blackhaven and then razed the place. I think they cut off Dondarrion's nose. The army grew to 30,000 men, or more, I think, and the Vulture King divided his troops in half, which was a fatal error of judgment from him. Both hosts were smashed. Savage Samwell Tarly conducted a vulture hunt, it was called, and the Pretender was taken and tied up until his death.
Now, King Aenys honored those who killed the bandits with gold and honors, and he named Maegor as his hand for dealing with the problems in the Vale.
Yeah, that's how Maegor became Hand. So that's the news about the bandits from this story. Harren the Red, Jonos Arryn, King Lodos, and the Vulture King. In the reading, this really is a kind of side story, but it all fed into the theme of Aenys being too weak politically and Maegor being a bit too cruel, which we've already discussed. It seemed making Maegor Hands there improved their half-brothers' relationship for a short while, and two dragons were hatched from a fire pit around the same time, which people saw as a sign of a new positive era between the two. And, as we know, the relationship between Aenys and Maegor didn't stay cordial for very long.
Okay, well, there you have it. I think we can all agree that Yolkboy has delivered so far, hasn't he?
Well, I did try my best, and I hope you like the Sons of the Dragon information there. I do have to give a huge shout out to Lord Varys and Aratan, two guys from the Westeros forum that I met, and they both got their reports out really quickly for the hungry fans, and that's also helped me organise my own thoughts. They were both really nice guys. I hung out with Lord Varys a lot at the con, and Aratan was kind enough to take a picture of me getting my book signed by George. And you can see that picture on the photo journal that's up at radiowesteros.com.
Yeah, I like the one of you on the Iron Throne too. King Yolkboy, first of his name.
Right, King Yolkboy. I do like that.
So, We like to have a reading arranged to music in each episode, so we've prepared a section from Game of Thrones from a Tyrion point of view, where we learn about Aegon the Conqueror and his invasion.
Yeah, it did seem appropriate. So here's The Field of Fire, read by Lady Gwyn.
Tyrion stood in that dank cellar for a long time, staring at Balerion's huge, empty-eyed skull until his torch burned low, trying to grasp the size of the living animal, to imagine how it must have looked when it spread its great black wings and swept across the skies, breathing fire. His own remote ancestor, King Loren of the Rock, had tried to stand against the fire when he joined with King Mern of the Reach to oppose the Targaryen conquest. That was close on 300 years ago, when the Seven Kingdoms were kingdoms and not mere provinces of a greater realm. Between them, the two kings had 600 banners flying, 5,000 mounted knights, and 10 times as many free riders and men-at-arms. Aegon Dragonlord had perhaps a fifth that number, the chroniclers said, and most of those were conscripts from the ranks of the last king he had slain, their loyalties uncertain. The hosts met on the broad plains of the Reach, amidst golden fields of wheat ripe for harvest. When the two kings charged, the Targaryen army shivered and shattered and began to run. For a few moments, the chroniclers wrote, the conquest was at an end, but only for those few moments, before Aegon Targaryen and his sisters joined the battle. It was the only time that Vhagar, Meraxes, and Balerion were all unleashed at once. The singers called it the Field of Fire. Near 4,000 men had burned that day, among them King Mern of the Reach.
Okay, so we hope you all enjoyed that reading, and all of our readings are now up at radiowesteros.com if you want to hear them again without messing around with these long files.
And so what did you bring back for us next, Yolkboy?
Well, I ran into Sir Mountain Goat. We have both used his wonderful animated timeline at sirmountaingoat.co.uk, haven't we?
Yes, we have, and that's Sir, S-E-R.
Right, and you're a timeline person, aren't you, Lady Wynn?
Yes, I am. I'm always trying to figure out when things happened relative to other things. I've used Sir Mountain Goat's project a heck of a lot, and I really love it. It's a great resource, and I was excited when you told me he'd agreed to an interview. Plus, he's one of the founding organizers of TitanCon.
That's right, and TitanCon is the Belfast sci-fi, fantasy and gaming convention, and we discuss TitanCon and the animated timeline in the interview, as well as Sir Mountain Goat's history with the fandom and the Brotherhood Without Banners fangroup.
So here's Radio Westeros meets Sir Mountain Goat at LonCon.
Nice to talk to you today, and welcome to Radio Westeros.
Hello, nice to be here, thank you.
Okay, so you've participated in many cons with the BWB. Can you tell us how exactly you got involved? And the burning question on many fans' minds, what's it like to hang out with George R.R. Martin?
Well, I first got involved, I suppose I should say that I got involved on Westeros first. It was quite a few years before I actually went to a convention. So it was around 2000, 2001 when I first read the books, and I went on to Westeros.org because that was, the fan site at that time. I primarily went to find out when the next book was coming out because I thought surely it won't be long.
And that decision has led you down the path now.
It certainly has. Many years later, finally the next book came out. And by that time I'd made a lot of friends on Westeros, and every year they'd go off to WorldCon and I'd hear the stories and I'd think, that sounds quite good. And
right.
So finally in 2008 I went to WorldCon. I went to Denver, that was my first one, and my primary reason for going was actually to meet the friends that I'd made on the internet.
Okay.
In many ways, meeting George and other fantastic authors that I adore.
Right.
I adore their work. It was a bonus in many ways.
That's a bonus, yeah.
Because I really wanted to go and meet the people that I talk with.
I guess with authors, you're not going to actually make that connection that you're going to make with your kind of fellow forumers and people you're friendly with on the internet.
Definitely not in the same way. I mean, meeting George is a great honour. You know, he's and he's a very relaxed guy. He's very friendly, willing to talk to just about anyone about anything really, and it was great to meet him and hang out at parties with him. And
were you ever knighted?
I was at Denver.
So that's why you're Sir. Is that when you put the Sir on your mountain goat?
That's where it came from.
Really excellent.
Yeah. And I suppose technically these days I'm a prince, because there's a progression that goes with this. I don't know if you've been told, but it's on your first con, they would send you out on a quest for food.
Right.
We had to go out and bring pizza, and so we became the knights of the mile-high tomato pie for Denver. So then when you get to 3 WorldCons, you become a duke or a dame.
Right.
And after 5, you become a prince or a princess. And 7, which I haven't got to yet, you become a king or a queen.
And, okay, you are one of the founding organisers of TitanCon, the Belfast convention. Do you want to give us a kind of overview of what's involved in TitanCon?
There's a lot involved in TitanCon.
It's a big question.
That is a big question, yeah.
But this is where the TV show is being filmed. So why don't you tell us about the advantages of that? Because you've got the actors close, haven't you?
Well, it's an advantage and a disadvantage. It's weird. When we started, I thought running it in the middle of the filming schedule would be good because the cast would be there and we could get them easily. But it turns out that maybe it wasn't quite so easy because
they're booked up.
Well, it's that, and it's also that the filming schedule is so changeable.
Okay.
Actors literally don't know what they're doing 2 weeks.
So they
from
can't
time.
give you a day because
no, and they can't confirm because the initial filming schedule is planned months in advance.
Right.
But then it changes and it moves as they go through the process due to various logistical and technical reasons. And so it can be very difficult to nail down who our guests are, and that makes it very difficult to plan a convention if you don't know who your guests are going to be.
Because you can't advertise. You can advertise a few maybes. It's not quite the same as
and we're committed to not announcing names until we are.
But people show up. That's all we have to say. People are around, and more likely than not.
This is our 4th year now, so I think a lot of our people know the score. They know that we will deliver great guests. We just don't know who.
Okay.
There'll be a party, and it's always fun to see the Game of Thrones actors out on the dance floor.
On the dance floor.
On the dance floor.
And you've already seen there's like this.
Yeah, there's videos on the internet if you want to look them up. There's a couple of vines as well, And then on Sunday we have a coach tour which visits filming locations around Northern Ireland. So while it's a one-day convention, it's run over 3 days.
Right. So you get to see you can see some of the rustic locations. And this is part of the Game of Thrones scenery. And
when we started, we felt we should have a coach tour because there's so many beautiful places in Northern Ireland and.
Well, that's why the way they film there, obviously, it's got so many different kind of environments. It sounds like you've got a great deal going on with TitanCon. I really recommend anyone that can get to Belfast at that time to consider going and experience a con if you never have. My next question is another thing you're well known for. Your website is lots about maps and timelines. What made you decide to embark on that particular project? What appealed to you about doing that?
It all started off from a thread on the Westeros forum. Someone said, I've got this great idea. It would be awesome if we had a map and we had the little dots on it and they all animated and moved to show how people moved and how they got closer to each other and then missed each other, and it'd be so cool. I wish I had the technical knowledge to do that. And I thought, I've got the technical knowledge to do that. Well, at least I thought I did. It took me about 2 months of work to figure out how to make that happen.
Just the groundwork, just to kind of preliminarily
just to figure out just to work
what
out
was
if
entailed.
I could do it. And having worked that out, I then needed to figure out what the timeline was. At that time, someone called Errant Bard had put together the most accurate timeline at that point, but I very quickly realised that wasn't going to be accurate enough for what I wanted to do with this. And so I started trying to figure out what the timeline was.
So you started taking on every aspect of this. You thought maybe you could get some help from the wider community, which you probably ended up doing, but at some point you're like, right, I'm going to have to, if I want this done properly, I'm going to have to really research this.
Exactly, and so I sat down with the books and plotted out everything that happens on a day-by-day basis. And that's the only way to do it, because there's so much that's going on, and I've really gone into very, very fine details, all the way down to sort of the movements of armies when they're being brought in ready for the for sort of summoning for the battles. You know how the Northmen go to Winterfell to join Rob's army as they're coming south, and it's you've got to figure out every little detail to make sure that there's enough time for people to move, because that's the other thing about it. You need the map. That was the main reason why I started the map project, is because we needed the map of the whole world, and at that time we didn't have one. This is before the Land, Spice and Fire came out, and so I sat down and designed the world. And here again I've started and riffed off someone else's work, and this is Tear is the name he goes by on the Cartographers Guild website, and he's the one who designed Westeros originally. I get all the credit for the map, but really the work that he did on his original version is amazing, because he designed the real look and feel of that map, which I get a lot of credit for, and I really shouldn't.
Right.
But it's a brilliant piece of work. What I'd done is corrected a few details that I thought maybe he hadn't quite got right. So I've moved a few of the locations which weren't exactly accurate to how the book describes them, and some of the terrain didn't quite match, like the swamps didn't quite go up to the edge of Moat Cailin, say, and the Golden Tooth Pass wasn't quite in the right place. So I've corrected it a little, and then I added speculative areas to the east for the Dothraki Sea and the Red Wastes, where Dany's journey is.
Okay.
Of course, all of that's long since out of date now, and I really need to update, and I've promised I would update it, and I haven't got around to it, but I will. I promise.
You will.
I get a lot of email from people when they say, will you update it? I will.
You will. Okay, Sir Mountain Goat, it's been really nice to have you on Radio Westeros. Thanks very much for doing this interview.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with TitanCon and your map project. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks.
So, Sir Mountain Goat, he sounded very nice.
Yeah, he was, and he found the time for that interview despite being quite busy, I think, and I really enjoyed our chats. It's worth mentioning that the TitanCon tours sound really good. You get to see lots of the Game of Thrones set, like Winterfell, and the place where the direwolf pups were found, the bridge where Jaime and Brienne fought, so the tourney site.
Oh, from season 1?
Yeah, the tourney in season 1. And Sir Mountain Goat told me that when they got there, they had a piggyback tourney or something like that.
Well, TitanCon sounds fun. It starts September 12th. If you can get to it, we'll link to the website as well as to the animated timeline, which I adore, on radiowesteros.com. And the talk of meeting George was interesting. And in fact, our next guest, Xray, is the Baroness of the fan group he mentioned, the Brotherhood Without Banners.
Yes, she is. And we have a great interview with Xray coming up, followed by my account of when I asked George R.R. Martin a question.
But before all that, a song from the fandom. Here's Tall Like Tyrion with The Bear and the Maiden Fair.
A bear, there was a bear, all black and brown and covered in hair. Oh, come, they said, come to the fair. The fair said he, but I'm a bear, all black and brown and covered in hair. And down the road from here to there, 3 boys that go to the dancing bear. They danced and spun all the way to the fair. Oh, sweet she was and pure and fair, the maid with honey in her hair, the maid with honey in her hair. The bear's one cent on the summer air, the bear, all black and and brown and covered with hair. He smelled the scent on the summer air. He sniffed and roared and smelled it there. Honey on the summer air. Oh, I'm a maid, I'm pure and fair. I'll never dance with a hairy bear. I'll never dance with a hairy bear. The bear lifted her high into the air. The bear, the bear, the bear. I called for a night, but you're a bear, all black and brown and covered in hair. She kicked and wailed, the maid so fair, but he licked the honey from her hair. He licked the honey from her hair. Then she sighed and squealed and kicked the air. She sang, my bear so fair. And off they went, the bear and the maiden fair.
So joining Radio Westeros right now, I'm with Xray.
Hello.
So first things first, Xray, can you tell us what the Brotherhood Without Banners actually is for those who haven't heard of it before?
The Brotherhood Without Banners, or the BWB, as I'll usually refer to it, is a loosely organized group of fans of George R.R. Martin's work. We were sort of founded around A Song of Ice and Fire, but we consider ourselves to be totally inclusive of people that are fans of Wild Cards or George's earlier works from the 80s.
Anything George.
Basically anything that George has
Any
written.
association.
If you just love Sand Kings, that's awesome. We love you.
Okay, so my next question, what are the origins of the BWB and when did you yourself become involved?
The BWB was started, probably the sparkle in Lodi's eye happened in late 2000, but the BWB had their first meeting at PhilCon, which was in August of 2001, and the first baron of the BWB was like, hey, George is going to be at this con. I want to buy him a beer. Does anyone else want to go to this convention, to this WorldCon, and buy George a beer with me? And a bunch of people said yes, and so they all traveled to Philadelphia and rented a hotel room and threw a party.
That was it, and here we are today, and this is my first time, so it's all gone back to that moment of buying George a beer.
You had to buy
Fantastic.
George a beer, you buy George a beer, you buy him a drink, and so it was very grassroots, very almost ad hoc. It was like, hey, let's just do this thing.
Just
it's
a very
awesome.
casual, let's go and meet an author,
Yeah, it was, I think, the way that most people go to WorldCon. It's like, oh, here's my favorite author. I would like to see some panels. I'd like to thank them personally for the work that they've done that's brought so much meaning to my life. I say my, meaning the general fan. Mm-hmm. And that's the impetus, I think, for most people that end up at WorldCon, and very specifically for the BWB. I got involved in 2006. I'd been on the boards for a while, but early 2006, my spouse and I decided to go to BosCon, which is a regional SF convention in Boston. Happens in mid-February. Mm-hmm. And it was mostly just like, I wanted to say thank you to George, but it was mostly like, there's all these people I talk to online, and I would like to drink with them. And it's much more, it was a very
social
low-key
thing, low-key, social, casual thing.
And everyone was very welcoming, and I showed up, and one of the main guys from the BWB, his name is Stego, he just grabbed me and threw me in front of George. He's like, you need to meet George.
Wow.
And I was like, your books are great. And then I ran away.
Went red and ran off.
Yeah, I was like, I'm going to go to the bar now.
Okay, as you said in the first question, BWB is very inclusive. Anyone can join. It's a grassroots movement. There's no membership fee or clique as such. Can you tell me what advantages this kind of inclusive ethos brings to the group?
Yeah, we try to bring the most diverse audience that we can. Science fiction and fantasy fandom is, or can be, at least at the literary stage, can be, it looks a little bit like a monoculture. People are around the same age, and many of them are, basically European, white,
right.
And with the BWB, we want everybody. I want, I want people from every socioeconomic class. The advantages, of course, is that fans are everywhere, and you just have to reach out and talk to them.
And you've got a common interest straight away.
And there's a common interest.
Straight
You're just like, one of the things that I think people always imagine, the white middle-aged nerd
right.
that collects comics. And that's, there are a lot of people out there like that, and that's great. I love all of them, but I want to be able to reach out into wherever fandom exists
with no barriers.
No barriers.
No barriers. Not even kind of financial.
No,
or
absolutely not.
Level
I don't want
how much you worship George, as long as you've got that association that you like his work. You're in if you want to be in.
Absolutely.
If you make the effort to get to
I don't want. It's like I don't want your money. I just want your passion.
Okay, the BWB is obviously tied to and inspired by George's writing and A Song of Ice and Fire. So what is it about A Song of Ice and Fire that has this power to bring people together and unite them, as the success and longevity of the BWB clearly demonstrates?
First and foremost, just looking at... I was actually a fan of George's writing before A Song of Ice and Fire. I've been reading him since the late 80s. Mm-hmm. And to me, what is so remarkable about his writing is just the profound humanity in it. He and especially with A Song of Ice and Fire, but even in like Fever Dream or Armageddon Rag, you're looking at characters who are profoundly flawed, and it's very easy to see yourself in those characters. So you see, like with A Song of Ice and Fire, people get very passionately behind. They'll either hate Caitlyn or they'll love her.
Yeah, there's polarizing effects that you see on the forums.
Exactly, and so there's a ton of projection that happens because he's so good at writing characters that are very believable and very concrete, but they're still just a bit of refraction so that each reader can see themselves in them or see the antithesis of themselves and so on. So I think that...
So you think people can kind of learn about themselves and...
Yeah, there's and they're going through the same struggles. It's not like they're the big human themes as opposed to sometimes you see the big themes in certain literature, science fiction, where it's just like, I wonder what it's like to build a ring world or whatever.
So in exploring the depths of these characters, you can relate to other people doing the same, and that's where you can kind of connect to other people.
Yeah, well, there's huge factions. There are people that love Tyrion and people that hate Tyrion, and I don't think there is a character in A Song of Ice and Fire that doesn't have a group for and against. I've been moderating the Westeros forums since 2006, basically.
Yeah, you're moderator, Xray the Enforcer. Yeah. You enforce. You're very friendly, actually.
I actually try and embrace people.
You are
maybe
friendly.
a little tighter than they wish to be embraced, but so it's like I've seen almost every trend that's gone through the fandom multiple times, and I don't think I've ever seen a character where somebody was neutral on. It's just like, I hate Pod.
Yeah.
Pod is such a wimp. Or it'd be like, no, Pod is the everyman. And so it's like, you're like, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Carry on.
It's okay to be in the middle sometimes, isn't it? But it just doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, no, it's like
polarizing effect.
I try and be neutral about some characters, but then it's like I think about it, I'm like, oh no, that jackass is horrible.
Okay, and George and Paris have close bonds with the Brotherhood. Can you tell us the history of their involvement with the BWB group? Yeah,
well, obviously the BWB wouldn't exist without George because the first Baron, his full name is Lodengarl the Three-Fisted. Lodi and all of that crew, they were just drinking beer with George, and obviously, like, Paris has been his partner for 30-some years. And so they were basically... George has always been very open to his fans. He was a fan to start out with, of comic books before he became a professional writer. And so he feels a very strong tie to fandom as a thing, as opposed to fans are people who buy my books. They exist both in his mind, but he, I think, feels very personally invested in the idea of fandom. And he met Paris... I believe he met her at a convention, so you'll have to fact check that with him. But fandom for him is like, it's also like most of his friends are here. So that's part of the reason why they're so involved with the BWB, is because we are also tied to the same fandom that he and Paris come from.
Okay.
And they're very supportive of what the BWB do. They don't try and impose
So he loves
their
what
will.
he does. He loves the fandom.
Yeah.
He's been there himself. He's probably looked up at authors As BWB look up at him and he remembers those days?
Oh yes, very much so. So you get him
his feet on the ground.
You give him a beer and you ask him about some of his favorite writers from like the 50s and 60s, and you'll be there for like 2 hours. So be like, let me tell you about blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, talk my ear off, George.
And he knights people. We have had a grounding of this tradition from Sir Mountain Goat. I just wondered if you could tell us
a little bit about the knighting. Did you hear about like the origins of the knighting?
Kind of. It wasn't it for pizza.
No, it was not.
This is what Sir Mountain Goat and I read differently. So.
Yes. Okay. So the original knighting happened at PhilCon. It was the very first WorldCon, and a boarder who still participates in the fandom, but a lot less than he used to. His name, I believe, was Xray. He had brought a sword, and they were drinking. The BWB were drinking with George in Philadelphia, and it was getting a little bit late, and Aggie was like, hey, George, you gotta knight me. And George is like, I can't knight you until you stand vigil and do a quest. And we're like, Aggie's like, okay, well, what are we gonna do? It's like, well, I'm kind of hungry, so let's go get cheesesteak.
Cheesesteak.
So they got into a taxi cab and went to Pat's and Gino's Cheesesteaks, which is the two famous Philadelphia cheesesteak restaurants. That's probably putting it too high of a pedestal. They're cheesesteak shops, and got cheesesteaks in the middle of the night, and then they stayed up drinking. And at the end of a few hours of this, George agreed to knight Agravain and Yagathai and a few others as the Knights of the Cheesesteak, and that was the very first. Yes, that was the very first knighting.
In the tradition, as Sir Mountain Goat said earlier, he kind of filled us in on what's happened and how it's evolved.
Yes, he got knighted when he was I believe he got knighted as the Mile High Tomato Pie, so that was going out for pizza in Denver.
They have different rules in Denver, obviously.
Yes.
No cheesesteaks.
Yeah, no. George actually would choose the quest based on a regional food. So, in Kansas City, they went for burnt ends, and there's a very long story about the Knights of the Sullied Dumpster, because they actually had to go dumpster diving to get food. I wasn't part of that, thank God. We have they're the Knights of the Pink Dog. That was in LACon 2006, where everyone drove halfway across the LA basin to get Pink's hot dogs. And the idea was that everyone buys all of the questees buy food and bring them back for the currently knighted and royalty of the BWB.
That's the nearest thing you have to an initiation ceremony.
Yes.
Even though you're inclusive of everybody.
Exactly,
you don't have to do this. It's better than running around naked.
Nobody is required.
It's not too frats, is it?
No. Nobody's required to do this. This is all voluntary.
Good laugh.
Of course, like once you've had a few drinks, like everything just sounds like a great idea. Like, sure, I'll totally take off halfway across hell and back to get you a hamburger. But so we have a list somewhere, and I don't have it in my head, of each of the years of the nights, and we basically had to stop doing that 2 or 3 years ago because there were so many people showing up at WorldCon. It was just like they'd be gone for 5 hours. I'm like, I want to go to bed. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. I really don't want a piece of pizza. I just want to shut the party down so I can sleep for 2 hours. So that's we basically, and it was a bunch of us all sat down, and George was part of this conversation. We talked about it. We're like, you know what, this has become unwieldy, so we should. Now everybody is being inducted into a free company.
Yeah, free company. Well, maybe I can be inducted into a free company. Mm-hmm. I can't be a Sir Yolkboy, but I'm no knight anyway. Okay, finally, what is the next big official BWB event in case any of our listeners are in the vicinity?
Yes, we tend to do one really official event a year, and that's WorldCon, and so that's going to be next August in Spokane, Washington. I don't remember the exact dates. But we do tons of regional stuff as well. So a bunch of BWB always go to BosCon in Boston. A bunch of people go to DragonCon every year. There won't be like an official party there, but you'll always be able to find people, especially if they're wearing a BWB t-shirt. But I would say that the next really big official thing would be next August.
Okay.
And that's in eastern Washington state in the United States.
Okay, so anyone able to get there should consider it. And the best place to keep up with the BWB activity is via the Westeros.org forums, isn't it? You've got your own sub-forum there?
Yes, we have the Brotherhood banner sub-forum, and that we have a website, but we don't keep that. We keep it up to date like on a half yearly basis, but things, all the regional meetings and just like, hey, I need a drink. Anybody in New York City need a drink with me? Like, we will literally have threads like that where you can just find anybody in a local city. So we have like anybody in India, anybody in Brazil. So it's like, if whoever you are out there, you can probably find us in those in that subforum.
Okay, it's been really wonderful to interview you, Xray. Best of luck from Radio Westeros to the BWB, and may it long continue. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So, after the Sons of the Dragon reading, there was a Q&A session. George invited questions from the crowd, and the room felt really silent. So I took the bull by the horns, and I asked him if he's enjoying writing this material. George said he absolutely loved writing it and called it fake history. He said it's a very different experience from his other writings. He's usually a big believer in the philosophy of show, don't tell. He doesn't summarise, he likes to dramatise. But with these fake histories, he said it's kind of the reverse. It's almost all telling and very little showing. George then went on to say that his histories are much like real history, just changed the Edwards for Aegons. He said that fake history is actually better because it has dragons, which improves any history, and the crowd laughed at that one. He concluded by saying it's all been really great fun, that the World of Ice and Fire book should have been out 4 years ago, but then he wrote 300,000 words that don't even fit in it. And that was the brief exchange between George and I during the Q&A session after the Sons of the Dragon reading.
So that's the end of our LonCon presentation. With the accompanying essay and photojournal, we hope that you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I know it seems like it was me doing all the work here, but honestly, Lady Gwyn was organising almost everything behind the scenes, and she was getting up at 5 a.m. every day to help me coordinate via my iPad.
Well, it's just a shame I couldn't be there, and thanks for travelling up and doing this at short notice. You did a fine job, Mr. Journalist.
Right. It was serious business, and I did my best. I even ironed my shirts.
Great.
It was great fun too.
Yeah.
I had a great time.
Well, it sounded like it. And so you asked George if he was enjoying writing. Why did you ask that?
Well, I think that it's quite pointless to try and get him to reveal his secrets, as lots of people try to do, and he must be a little bit bored of that by now. So I just thought asking him if he was enjoying writing would lead to a funnier response.
Well, it was a funny response. Fake history, it's like real history, but with dragons.
Yes.
So now tell us about the signing.
Well, in the signing, I queued for 2 hours. Well, you know this because I was on my iPad too, don't you?
Yes. Fine.
It was actually slightly sad. George is now such a huge star. It's like he's become a rock star, but he became a rock star when he was in his 60s, you know. And the signing was very mechanical. We were kind of pushed through. It was a bit like being in a sheep pen, really. And George barely had the time to kind of make eye contact with people or talk or anything like that.
Oh, so these accounts of George loving interactions with fans.
I'm sure he really still does. It's just that if he walked around the con when it was at capacity like that, he might be afraid of getting mobbed, I guess. And this is really a side product of him becoming so famous. Perhaps that was triggered by the HBO series. But we all know that he loves cons and mixing with fans. So that's why I found it a bit sad that he can't really do that anymore.
Yeah, he has commented on the negative aspects of being famous more than once recently.
Right.
Yeah. So now tell us about your signing.
Okay, so while he was actually signing my A Game of Thrones book, and he was looking like a bit of a machine in a way, like I've mentioned, I put a Radio Westeros business card on the desk. Yes, they do exist. There is such a thing. And he saw it on his table and picked it up. And for a moment, he looked really enthusiastic. And he said, Radio Westeros. Just a bit like that in his New Jersey accent, with a big smile on his face, which was priceless for me. And he looked up to start to talk to me about it. But by then I was getting ushered along, and he paused for a second and then just continued with this kind of conveyor belt of signings that, I'd been a part of. So I don't feel all that great about the process. Like I said, it had a sheet pen feel to it. I don't think I'd get anything else signed, really. I just think that I wouldn't want to do it again. It's strange hearing stories of the old days where he would, sign 8 copies of books and he would talk to everyone individually. And now the fame has really impacted on his relationship with his audience, and I think that's quite clear.
Right. I mean, you can argue about all the positive aspects of success, but
like the money,
right?
People would say.
But at the end of the day, there's just simple, normal things he can't do anymore.
Yeah, he's a human being. He can have money, but if he can't do the things he likes to do, it is sad.
Right. He mentioned he can't walk down the street anymore without being recognized.
I think he might be a bit uncomfortable with it, really. So it is a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it seems to be.
Okay, so what's next? I went to the Brotherhood Without Banners party. So I'm now a member of the Brotherhood Without Banners. My signature is on their banner, and I met lots of fans and got to know some really nice people. LonCon was my first convention. I'd definitely do it again. It was perhaps a little bit expensive, I thought, but I recommend to listeners to consider giving a con a try if you're able to. If George is there, then you've got the Brotherhood Without Banners to be involved in, which is open to everyone, like we discussed with Xray. So you can check out their sub-forum at westeros.org.
Yeah, and, that chat with Xray was great.
Yeah, she's really nice, and she's the kind of person who makes stuff happen. That was my impression of her. She's very proactive, and she's smart, as you could tell, and she gives up a lot of her time to organise events for the Brotherhood Without Banners and the fandom. And there's truly some fantastic people doing things to make the A Song of Ice and Fire fandom into a really positive community. I've now seen it firsthand. And I think George must be very proud of that. In some ways, that's his real legacy, I think. Xray, Sir Mountain Goat, Elio Linda, and everyone that helped me at the con, you know who you are. A huge thank you from Radio Westeros.
Yeah, thanks to all of you, and that's it for our WorldCon of Ice and Fire episode. We will be on track with the promised RLJ episode very soon. We just had to slot this one in here on short notice.
Yeah, we'll be with you with the RLJ episode soon. And also thanks to 9 Inch Nails for allowing us to remix and use elements of their Ghost album here, and to Like Tyrion for their rendition of The Bear and the Maiden Fair, which is excellent. All licensing and music links are on our website and also in the MP3 tag. And a final thanks to George R.R. Martin, who read wonderfully at the con and really made it a special experience, despite not getting to meet him for longer than 5 seconds.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in.